Today we're drawing birds. I guess I'm drawing birds. Maybe you're drawing birds too. You should draw birds with me. This would be fun. Last week on a Discord server, we were studying birds, and so I sat down like any normal human being and decided I was going to go ahead and start working through them. I got a little bit maybe anxious or nervous about it at the beginning, as I often do when I record things for the first time in a week or a day. So I started with a pencil because pencils alleviate some of that pressure. Though immediately I start working on this chonky little fluff nugget and it feels fine. It feels just all right. I like working on birds. There's something about the harmony of their fluffiness, which is really kind of hard to get a feel for, and then also the beaks and eyes, which are these solid things, these really hard things. I find drawing things like cats and dogs and horses to be far more difficult because they feel like they're nothing but fluff. And then the other side is things like robots or vehicles are all hard lines. Birds are this wonderful merger of the two. Perhaps more importantly, though, birds are just a fun kind of thing that you run into in your normal everyday life. Hopefully you live somewhere where you see birds. We live out in the country, but we have a couple bird feeders and we collect most of the normal kind of birds. Sparrows, larks, little ones like you see here. We don't get a lot of robins this time of year, but they gotta start showing up soon. We always have the ubiquitous magpies, and mostly I just try to keep them from eating the dog's food because they're so huge that they're like giant ravens or crows. They just do what they want. And they're smart enough to actually pull it off. But it's important to look around and to find things like that, things that occur in your normal daily life where beauty can be found, where beauty can be mined. Beauty occurs in most places, but it's almost like we have to be primed to look for it. We don't see it sometimes if we're not looking for it, unless it happens to be something that's so outrageous that it pulls us into that moment immediately. Some people ran into this with the eclipse that happened in April. This spectacular moment that only happens once in a lifetime or once every couple years, because I sometimes fail to track what actually made this one different than the last couple we've seen. But it's one of those things that's so different from your normal life that it pulls you into appreciating beauty. I am of the mind that if you try, though, you can find beauty in a lot of mundane places. If you sit down at your kitchen counter and you simply start drawing things, you're going to find that the shapes of spoons and forks and glasses and mugs are far more intriguing than you thought originally. If you start shoving eyes on them, mouths on them, you might get some eldritch horrors, but you might also get something like the Brave Little Toaster, where these little inanimate things have come to life and they're these cute little characters. There is beauty to be found in our day-to-day life. But also, studying a single thing always seems to teach you more about drawing or painting in general. As I focus on these tiny little birds, these little fluff nuggets, I start to learn more about how fur is going to function, how hair might function on a human. Why? Because all of the feathers are essentially acting like large pieces of hair, like fur. Now, they're not, I know that structurally in my mind, but when we draw things, we aren't drawing the real thing. We're drawing a physical representation of something. Obviously, we're reducing the three-dimensional world down to a two-dimensional representation, but we are also just alluding to all of these shapes and realities. And so certain things that are really nothing alike end up being similar. Are the feathers on a bird similar to shingles on a roof? Well, yes, in structure, actually, in letting the water cascade off and not getting in, but they're also similar when you're sitting down to put them together and to draw them. Now, for me, I love drawing these eldritch horrors and things of tentacles and eyes and claws. I like drawing dragons and monsters. So where do the birds help me with those pursuits? How do the birds help me draw the robot series that I'm working on? Well, let's start with the other things. The way that birds are constructed is fundamentally different than how we're constructed, and exploring that difference can sometimes just open our minds and our eyes to different things. Sure, the claws, the eyes, the beaks are going to literally translate, but there's different ways that those things kind of come across in a bird, in this cute little creature, than they would elsewhere. And that's the weird part about drawing in general, is that each thing you dedicate time to, each specific thing you try to learn how to replicate, to illustrate, to draw, to paint, all of those things will have aspects that lend themselves to other things. Nothing is really detached. Now, when I go to draw a dragon or a dinosaur, birds are kind of inextricably linked to them. Imagine for a moment that you just put teeth into a beak. Well, you've basically created a dinosaur. If you peel back some of the scales on their legs and take that up into the rest of the body and have some of the feathers fade away, you get a dinosaur immediately. And really, dragons are just kind of fantastic extrapolations anyway. So you can get these wonderful things that come out of nowhere when you're just working with something as simple as a bird. Now, these birds we're studying on the Discord server. This is a couple weeks back from when I'm recording right now. The week that I'm recording this, we're actually working on fish. It's important to study things. It's really easy, I think, to fall into, I draw this because this is what I enjoy drawing, this is what I get commissions for, this is what people expect from me. I think it's really important to draw other things. I already mentioned how you should try to find the beauty in your day-to-day, but there's also something to be said for just taking a week or two and focusing on a specific thing. When was the last time you sat down and drew birds and that was your drawing session for a couple days? Or fish, or mountains, or rocks? Yet all of those things not only are things that you might want to draw or illustrate at some point, but they also plug into a whole bunch of other arenas, other things that you might want to work with. When I spend a lot of time drawing rocks, I'm not just thinking about rocks. Well, maybe in that moment I am, but it's not like it's going to apply to just rocks. Working on rocks really teaches you a lot about three-dimensional form, hard surfaces, textures, and frequently, assuming you're not only working with river rocks, you're also working with the idea that the light and shadow is shifting really dramatically and really quickly as it gets to singular surfaces. Each thing that you invest time into, each thing that you study artistically, will give you advantages in many other places. And also, some days it's just hard to focus. Some days it's hard to decide what you want to work on. And sometimes having that decision already made, this is what I'm studying this week, or maybe you just have a list of things that you want to study when you really don't have a whole lot of motivation, that's a great idea. I often do this. I've done this for years and years. When I sit down, it's like, well, I need to draw right now. Maybe I set this time aside. Maybe for me, I need to record it for a video. But more often than not, it's just, I'm tired. It's the end of the day. I'm worn out. Maybe it was a hard day. And I still need to get some drawing time in because I don't want the skills to fade away into nothingness. Well, if I, in those moments, try to make something that's really imaginative, something that's really creative, it can often feel like I have the weight of the world on me. But you know what dissipates that? Is focusing on one specific thing. I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to practice some perspective for a little while. I'm going to draw a whole bunch of boxes in 3D. I'm going to draw some birds. I'm going to work on flowers. I'm going to look up some pictures of grass because I always make grass like a toddler when I draw it in the foreground of my pieces. So I'm actually just going to go look up some grass for a few minutes and try to figure out what makes grass look like grass. You know what I've done in that moment? I've taken the potential stress, nervousness, and anxiety, and I've turned it into something productive. And at the end of the session, I'm just sitting there drawing. I have something to show for it. What will often happen halfway through a drawing session like that is I will start to shift and I'll make things more interesting. If I'm just drawing grass, I'll start sneaking little characters in and amongst it. Or if you're me, the grass will turn into tentacles and we've got some kind of Lovecraftian horror coming out of nowhere. But it always seems to warp. At the end of the day, I just need to get myself into it. And if I have something to focus on at the beginning of the session, it dismantles just enough of that stress that I can dive in and I can work on whatever is before me. And right now, that's these birds. These birds are something to focus on, something that I can work with, something where there's not a lot of stress. If I mess one up, that's fine. There's just not a lot in the way of stakes. And sometimes that's exactly what you need for working on your artwork. So whether it's birds or fish, robots, anime girls, whatever it is that gets you into that drawing session starts to dismantle that anxiety and nervousness. go after that. And then once you're drawing, you'll probably find that it's easy to shift into something that's more efficient, more productive, if you need to. Because you don't always need to. Sometimes drawing birds is fun enough, rewarding enough in and of itself, and you don't need to move into anything else. I know it sure is that way for me sometimes. Well, as always, thanks for listening. I'm always happy to have you guys along for these sketchbook sessions, for my rambles about things while I'm working on studies or drawings. I would love to hear what you are working on while you listen to this, or what you happen to be studying in your life right now. If you would like to join our Discord community, there's a link for it below. We work on things like this each week, studying different things, but we also have some fun, imaginative drawings that we work on as well. Things like serpents that wrap themselves around the world, or an alien trying to fit into a normal day job. Thank you to patron Who, What, Where, When for your support. If you're looking to support the channel, you'd also like to peek at some of the videos coming down the line, maybe vote on what the podcast or sketchbook sessions could be about, or even read my scripts ahead of time, you can do so by supporting the channel on Patreon. The link is down below as well. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.